welcome back to another video, and I know it's been a very long time since I've done one of these lore videos as we go around Eorzea, and well, I guess now is a good time to really start getting back into that. We still need to have at least a couple projects to do as we wait for 6.2 to come out, or even 6.15, which we still don't have a release date yet, but hey, what can you do? Anyway, I decided that we are going to be finishing up with Gridania today. So this is going to be my little adventure across Eorzea as we explore the map of Hydaelyn, or I guess its real name is Etheirys now. So thank you for joining me here today, and let's go over what we know so far for both the South Shroud and the North Shroud. Okay, so we have covered basically every part of Gridania so far. We covered the main city, as well as the Central Shroud and the East Shroud. Unfortunately, they don't have a West Shroud at all kind of mixed in here. I think it was lost during the Calamity. They did have it back in 1.0, but again, during the Calamity it was just completely wiped out, so really not much left of it. Apparently it became part of the river, and most of it is just pretty much underwater at this point, so what can you do with that? Anyway, we are going to be covering the South Shroud, North Shroud, and the Lavender Beds, which of course is the housing district for adventurers. So let's go ahead and start off with the South Shroud. In days of yore, the city of Amdapor flourished amidst the trees of the South Shroud. Now the lumber line cuts through the area from north to south, and the merchants traversing the trading route must be wary of brigands with an eye for their wares. So this particular area is kind of infamous for bandits and poachers. So this area is about 40% forest, about 40% swamplands, and about another 20% for old ruins. And not just ancient ruins either, like the remains of old decrepit houses, like from since before the Calamity. And they are the perfect hiding places for a lot of poachers and bandits around this area. So it's definitely a place that you want to keep an eye on your purse before you get stabbed in the dark. So let's go ahead and start here with the upper path. So this is an area through which the lumber line passes, and it lies close to Gridania in the northern tip of the South Shroud. We have 4 distinctive landmarks within this particular area. So let's start off with Bhaskaran's Scar. So following the Calamity, Gridania shifted the focus of its surveillance network. Thus, though it was once manned by a sentry named Bhaskaran, this lookout post has long since fallen into disuse and disrepair. So this was once kind of an area for lookouts where Bhaskaran kind of stood guard, but there's really not much point in using it anymore. And if you're wondering who Bhaskaran was, he was actually a famous spearsman who pretty much did sentry work all on his own during this part of the Shroud. However, he kind of left that all behind him when he opened up the Druthers. So next up is Bhaskaran's Druthers, and is run by the disenfranchised ex-sentry turned tavern keep and welcomes all manner of folk, from upstanding to unsavory, so long as they follow his strong-armed simple rules of etiquette. Sit down, forget your worries, and savor your ale. So yes, you can actually see him behind the bar here. Like I said, he was once a very strong, very famous spearsman who kind of kept watch over this entire section of the Twelveswood, but eventually it just got to a point that he didn't want that lifestyle anymore and decided to open up a tavern instead. You know, sit back, listen to other people's worries, and see what he can do to help them. Just about anyone and everyone is welcomed here, and he's not going to be the kind who turns people away. In fact, he's actually been known to help not only listen to people's problems, but gives them really helpful advice. And so long as you pretty much follow his rules, he's not going to rat you out. Alright, moving up to a little bit more to the north, we have the 1,000 Maws of Toto-Rak. So a lot of people are actually familiar with this particular dungeon, and to be honest, I really don't blame all the hatred that it does get. It was named after a man-eating creature from folklore. The 1,000 Maws of Toto-Rak was built on the site of a natural cave system beneath Silent Arbor. Until recently, it also held all of Gridania's foulest criminals, from arsonists to poachers, but the completion of a new jail closer to the city heralded its abandonment. So yes, this does seem to be part of the ancient city of Gomorrah. However, like the Deep Croft, the Gridanians decided to try to use it in modern day, and they decided to make a prison out of it. And it does seem that it did work for a while. However, apparently because it was just so far from the main city, it was just hard to be able to keep track of all the criminals inside. And eventually, once another prison was built a little bit closer to the city, it was pretty much abandoned, like I said before. So now only very bored adventurers seem to venture into here anymore. And it really makes you wonder if this is how it is abandoned after just a couple years. Kind of makes you concerned what else the Shroud could be hiding. And finally, in the upper paths, we have Isambhar. It's the thicket some distance from the path, and the way to Isambhar was opened by a rock that fell from the sky during the calamity. Within the gaping hole slumbers untouched Gamorrean ruins. What they contain, however, is a matter of no small speculations, as someone has placed a powerful ward upon the entrance. So yes, this is actually another part of Gamorra, and people are really interested trying to learn more about the city of Gamorra, so that's why they have like whole excavation teams here. However, trying to be able to explore the ruins properly has been very difficult just because there are powerful wards that kind of keep out all intruders. However, it does seem that this is the entrance to the Palace of the Dead, or rather one of several different entrances. And if that place is anything to go by, probably best if we keep the ward up. Okay, so that's everything that we need to know about the upper paths. We're going to be moving now down to the lower paths. So the South Shroud is kind of separated into 5 different areas. So we covered one, and now we're going to be moving to the lower paths, which is from Thanalan. The lower paths act as a proverbial doorstep of the Twelveswood, and travelers passing through are greeted by the sights of Roots Lake and ancient Amdapor ruins. So merchants who come from Udal to kind of trade their wares with Gridania do have to take this path as they move upwards towards Gridania. So there's about 4 different major landmarks to really look at. So let's start with the main one, which is Camp Tranquil. So this is a Gridanian outpost, and it stands atop a stone towering over Roots Lake. The 6th Spear of the Wood Whalers is garrisoned here, led by the former company of heroes, Captain Landonell. And this also happens to be where one of 2 separate aetheryte crystals are, so you can definitely teleport directly here. And it is a safe area, so you can count on the guardsmen to kind of keep you safe, especially if you are a lower level player. Next up, we have the lost city of Amdapor. Now, we can't explore the city properly here, it's actually just part of a dungeon. However, the doorway to the city lies a little bit more to the west. So, the lost city has been cloaked by the elementals so that none might stumble upon its terrible secrets. The calamity weakened the area's earth aspect, however, and the place now wants for a good cleansing of the fetus fungus that has infested its halls. So you can actually see kind of like the very outskirts of the city, like entire mountain was kind of built up around its city, or maybe it was actually built inside the little mountain area. So no one can actually get into the city except through the little doorway, which is kind of warded off as well. However, as you can see, nothing green is growing around this area. There is like a lot of contamination from dark magics, like very powerful ancient magics, and I'm guessing that the calamity did not help at all. So definitely not a safe place to venture into, especially on your own. But let's move a little bit more to the east to Roots Lake. Wise travelers take to the bridges that hang between the great rocks protruding from this muddy marshland. These provide safe passage over the heads of the fell monsters that constantly prowl in the mire of Roots Lake. And so yes, this area is mostly swampland, and as someone who is technically living near a swamp right now, it's not the easiest place to live. There's a lot of horrible things that are lurking in the mud, so it's best to just take the easy way, just travel up through these little suspension bridges between boulder to boulder, and it will eventually lead you right up to the upper paths and hopefully to safety. And finally, like at the very southern tip, we have the South Shroud Landing. It was constructed by Highwind Skyways to serve as a landing for cargo ships. This location was quickly abandoned when the Imperial presence in the area became too large to ignore. Now the site is used as a makeshift market where bandits and poachers peddle their ill-gotten wares from the eyes of the law. So it's so nice to see how even the ruffians and outcasts of society can go ahead and work together to be able to make new friends this way, isn't it? So I kind of discovered this place by accident, and I was really fascinated by it, and it's actually a pretty decent little hideout. Like, compared to a lot of other buildings that we find which are pretty much in ruins, this one is definitely still standing. I'm a little surprised that the guardsmen don't do anything about this area. Like, if they knew that this is where poachers and bandits all gathered together to meet and kind of trade off all sorts of goods, you'd think this would be the first place that they would try to, set up an ambush, but that's just me. Okay, so those are the most important landmarks that we have for the lower path. So let's go ahead and move more to the eastern side. We have Snake Molt, Silent Arbor, and Uras Gift. So let's just go ahead and do Uras Gift first, which is just the one small area. So its ancient writings tell that in exchange for her lifeblood, Lady Urith was able to seal the dark divinity Odin in the crystalline prison beneath a bubbling wellspring. To honor her sacrifice, the land upon which she drew her last breath still bears her name. So yes, this place is very familiar to a lot of people because this does appear to be a place that the dark divinity, the primal Odin, is often seen in this area. Or at the very least, rumors of him are constantly in this area. It's a very beautiful place though, if you ask me. A lot of like these rainbow crystals, a bubbling spring, and if you ignore the fact that there is about I would say a 60% chance of the dark divinity showing up and possessing you or just challenging you to a fight, I would say it's a really nice area to go ahead and stick around in. Okay, so moving a little bit more to the west, we have Snake Molt. So this area is really mostly covered in ruins. So local legend has it that in ages past it was this very spot that a great serpent shed its skin, a skin that remained undecayed for thousands of years until one day it simply vanished, but for a single scale. Well, some people speculate that this creature may have actually been a wingless, legless worm. The matter remains a topic of debate within certain circles. So I can't say for sure if that's true, like maybe it was some kind of a dragon that had no arms or legs or wings. That's hard to say. I mean, we do know that giant worms and snakes can appear here, but probably a good idea not to really question where this thing came from. Otherwise, this place is just really filled with a bunch of old ruins from Amdapor Keep. So this was created for the defense of Amdapor. This stone stronghold was long since hidden within the tangled of the Twelveswood. This was by the will of the elementals, who sought to keep it away from the prying eyes of men since the Sixth Umbral Calamity. However, even their wards could not withstand the most recent calamity, and now Amdapor Keep is once again visible in the forest. So I find it really fascinating that most people didn't know anything about Amdapor, that they were able to live their entire lives in these woods and not find a single ruin. So the elementals really did their job trying to keep it all hidden. However, because the power of the elementals was badly damaged during the calamity, they just don't have the strength to be able to kind of keep this going, so people are slowly starting to explore the ruins. And as stated, this was just one of many different defenses for Amdapor. And finally, we'll be moving on to the Silent Arbor. So this is an area where the elementals permit hunting. It has also been a source of concern in recent times, from trespassing poachers to roaming Duskbright bandits to many disturbing the wood's peace for Gridania's comfort. So kinda have to be very careful, like don't take more than what you need. So in this area we have 4 major landmarks. Let's go ahead and start with Quarry Mill. So this is where the second of the 2 aetheryte currents are currently located, and you can very easily teleport here. Once a deal had been struck between the Gamorreans and the Elementals, allowing their return to the forest surface, the Elezen began unearthing large quantities of boulders to build the foundations of their new city of Gridania. The water wheels of Quarry Mill were raised to power the hammers, which rendered the massive stones into workable blocks. So this place is really more than just a little village or an outpost. It does have a very practical side to it, in that the stones that kind of used to build up the foundation for Gridania are cut into pieces here. So probably not used nearly as much as it used to, especially since most of Gridania happens to be made out of wood. I can definitely see them still using it, so not going away anytime soon. The next landmark we have Red Belly Hive. This was once known as the village of Balbury, and the original residents were forced to flee their homes during the calamity. It was a notorious band of outlaws known as the Red Belly Wasps that have since taken the place as their own. And this is now known as the Red Belly Hive. It's the site of many a skirmish between the bandits and the Wood Whalers, who attempt to reclaim it for the rightful owners. They technically did abandon their homes, but because the sky was pretty much on fire and giant pieces of a satellite were falling all around them, you can't really blame them for abandoning it. However, the bandits have kind of claimed this area as their own, so they're not going to give it up without a fight. So it is going to be kind of difficult to predict how long it will take for the Wood Whalers to reclaim it. Then again, with the ending of the final days and everything, and pretty much peace between the Sylphs and the Ixali, the Wood Whalers are going to have to do something to keep their time occupied. Another part that has kind of been overrun by outlaws is known as Taker's Rot. Taker's Rot serves as a lair to a band of Makote poachers calling themselves the Korokos. For Gridanians who see these criminals as rotten to the core, the hideout's name also serves as a curse upon the heads of these lawless hunters. So basically they're hoping that if they curse the name maybe enough times with enough venom, the gods will take notice of it and maybe cause the poachers to kind of rot. I don't know. It is fun to think about. So yes, this just happens to be another place where people used to live until the calamity and the original inhabitants had to leave, which led to outlaws moving in and sort of just squatting here. And finally, we have the Moontune Cellars. So these cellars ferment Moontune beans into beverages and seasonings, which are known throughout the realm as Gridania's delicacies. As you can see here, this is actually just a tiny portion of what they used to have. Unfortunately, the calamity ended up caving in about 2/3 of the chambers that were needed, so they're not able to produce nearly as much as they used to. So that's pretty much everything that we need to know about the South Shroud, including all of the landmarks, the different areas and locations, and definitely one of the rougher places of Gridania, especially with the poachers and bandits kind of stalking about. But otherwise, definitely a place full of wonder and mystery, especially if you look at the ruins and maybe a little bit of danger when it comes to Odin possibly making an appearance. Okay, so now let's go on to the North Shroud. So bordering the Ishgardian region of Coerthas, the North Shroud is the foremost battleground of the Cod's Quiver, who must stand and defend Gridania from Ixali war balloons that fly down from Ixatal in the northeast. So this area is actually a little bit smaller than the South Shroud, only has 4 major areas to really look into. The first one is known as Tree Speak, Peace Garden, Adder's Spring, and Proud Creek. So let's go ahead and start with Tree Speak. So this is an area just beyond Gridania's Yellow Serpent Gate. Tree Speak gains its name from the closely knitted branches. When a breeze passes through the canopy, the rustling sounds as if the elementals are whispering to one another. So kind of a nice effect, though it can cause some panic among the civilians if they don't know exactly what's going on, you know? Inside this area we have 3 different landmarks. The first one is known as Tree Speak Stables. So Tree Speak Stables is operated by Uras Gift mounts. Its chocobo keeps make fine steeds of the noble birds that are bred and raised to adulthood by Bench Branch Meadows. So the chocobos here are from Bench Branch Meadows from the Central Shroud. That's where they're born and raised, and once they reach adulthood they are brought here where they're, I suppose, technically trained for battle. So these are chocobos that are bred for soldiers to be able to ride them straight into the heart of a fight. Moving over here, we have Etat's Spire. So like its brethren, this water spire bears the name of a historical Gridanian hero, Etat Ray, a Paja who made great contributions to the advancement of Kundry. So I'm guessing that he was a very talented, very powerful healer. And I also think that he helped contribute to creating the Conjurer's Guild at one point several centuries past. Not really much else to say here except that we do still have guards on the lookout for the north in case any Ixali war balloons are spotted. And finally we have Blessed Bud. Thought to be the dwelling of an elemental, the Blessed Bud sprouted from a stump. It is said that passers-by can actually feel the force of its vitality. So again, not really much of interest to really speak about this place. It's actually considered to be kind of sacred ground, like a sacred stump, where a very powerful elemental once was. And it is one of several sacred areas that people who are learning the art of Kundry can come here, pray, and really start taking their first steps into learning the art of Kundry. Okay, so moving up a little bit more to Peace Garden. Not really much to say here for Peace Garden, except that it serves to honor the memory of the mages who first spoke to the elementals, and thereby allowed Gridanians to live in the Twelveswood. There's really only one landmark to pay attention to, and that's known as Hurst Mill. Though itself only a small hamlet on the edge of the North Shroud, Hurst Mill is very close to Exile territory and serves as an important supply outpost for the God's Quiver. Hurst Mill also is surrounded by various ruins significant for the study of history, as well as seemingly out-of-place creatures such as the Deep Void Death Mouse. So just another tiny village that serves the purpose of basically just studying history, serving as an outpost, and apparently keeping an eye out for Deep Void Death Mouse. So, I mean, it's a cool name, but not really sure how dangerous it is. So let's go ahead and move a little bit more to the west to an area known as Adder's Springs. So I know it doesn't really look like much right now, but this used to be a very beautiful area of once vast grove of giant adders. Unfortunately, it was pretty much all reduced to a charred graveyard after the flames of the Calamity got through with it. But from here we have 4 landmarks to keep an eye on. The first one is known as Fallgourd Float. To demonstrate a village need not fell trees to secure space, Fallground Float was built atop a lake. Though the project may seem strange to outsiders, the villages have grown quite fond of their bobbing home. So it is quite literally on top of a small lake. And this place does contain the only aetheryte that we have in the North Shroud. So it is definitely a safe place to be able to rest, relax, and pay a visit to its inn, which is known as the Bobbing Cork. Fallground Float's inn, the Bobbing Cork, promises its beds are so soft as to make the weary travelers feel light as a cork drifting upon a still pond. Really nice way to put it, actually. So, not a place that, unfortunately, we can't go ahead and try these out. It's really not a place for adventurers, really more of, I guess, merchants passing through. Okay, moving up here we have what's known as Thorntail's Spire. Thorntail, the legendary hero whose name the spire bears, is said to have been the lover of Iguna, for whom another watchtower has been titled. Not really much is actually known about these particular warriors, but I'm guessing they must have been pretty badass warriors, especially if a pair of lovers was actually named for these 2 spires. Otherwise, the only other major landmark that we can look into in this particular part of the area is known as Finder's Bluff. The miners from Udal build this humble shack while they survey the mineral wealth of the surrounding areas. So it's kind of an area that Gridania is letting Udal inspect, look around, see if they can mine anything particularly useful or valuable, and I guess they're going to kind of take it from there if they actually find something of worth one day. And finally, we're going to be looking at Proud Creek. Proud Creek is actually in the northern part of North Shroud. And of late, this area to the north of Fallground Float is thick with exiles who seem more numerous each day than the last. So this is kind of a area that the exiles seem to have, quote-unquote, made part of their territory. At the very least, they seem to be squatting in this area. So here we have 3 major landmarks. So the first one is known as Gilmora Ruins. Beneath this area once sat the capital of Gomorrah, whence tunnels stretched out far and wide. Now little more than ruins of the great subterranean city remain. You can actually see this particular area in 6.1. It was definitely above ground at that point. However, like I said before many times with the Calamity, it just caused so much damage that basically the land was splitting apart. So this particular opening is now completely caved in. It's tilted, lopsided, most of it is buried underneath. Probably not an area we'll be able to explore in the near future. I mean, it would be definitely cool to have a dungeon for Gomorrah, other than the Palace of the Dead, but I have to confess that my hopes aren't particularly high. Next up, we have Ignuna's Spire. So this is actually the second tower that we talked about before. And following the other watchtowers, the spire takes its name from a hero of Gridania, and it's home to the White Rams. It's located close to Exile territory, and a band of quivermen stationed at this outpost enter the fray often and fiercely. So this definitely seems to be getting a little bit more action than the other spire that we have at the very far edge of the North Shroud, trying to prevent the Exile from getting too ambitious and try to take over all of the North Shroud. But speaking of the Ixali, we have the Ixali logging grounds. So the Ixali have never taken well their banishment from the Black Shroud, and to this day they continue to fell the giant centils growing up on the forest outskirts. Too heavy to drag back to their settlements in Nataland, however, the ill-gotten lumber is tied to balloons, buoyed with Ixali airstones, and flown to the Beast Tribe's homeland under the cover of night. So very, very clever how they do that. So they secretly cut down a whole bunch of trees, they wait till night, and then they tie these giant logs to their war balloons, and using the power of these airstones that are apparently gifted to them from Garuda, they're able to fly these giant logs all the way back up the mountains to Zelfatol and Natalan, where they're actually being able to use to build their homes, more war balloons, and basically everything else that they need. Anyone who's traveled through Zelfatol can actually confirm this. They use a lot of giant logs in their architecture. And yeah, so that's pretty much everything for both North Shroud and South Shroud. So I'm just going to mention very quick the lavender bed. Not really much to talk about the lavender beds, but I will definitely say this, that out of all the areas that we have housing districts, this one definitely seems to be a little bit of the neglected side. So definitely not the most popular area. I mean, this is where I built my home, but that's really because it was the only area that was left at the time. Though to be honest, I'm not entirely sure why it's so unpopular. I mean, it is on a tiny island in the middle of a vast lake. It's in the shade of a giant tree, and it's just full of plant life, lots of greenery, covered in flowers, and these flowers actually glow at night, so it really is quite pretty, like especially when it's connected with all of these covered bridges, built up one on top of each other on almost like natural ground, and they have like these nice little cobblestone walkways that we can travel up and down. And if you ever want to, you can go ahead and just jump straight on into the lake. You really can. You can swim around and have a good time with your friends and neighbors. So definitely a really nice area if you ask me, and I'm not just saying that because this is where my home is. So FYI, if you ever want to come by for a visit, I'm in the 9th ward on the 30th plot, so yeah. So please come by, have a chat, love to meet ya, so that's just me anyway. Anyway everyone, thank you so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed it and that you're enjoying my Lore of Hydaelyn series. So we are going to be coming back, and I'm going to be doing as much as I can for the foreseeable future, at least until 6.2 comes out. So I am planning to try to cover at least all the areas up to Heaven's Ward before 6.2. I'm not going to have my hopes up too high for that, but I do want to cover as many areas as I can before 6.2. I am hoping to shoot for getting all of the Heaven's Ward areas at the very least knocked out of the way. We'll see how well that goes. So with this, we are officially closing out everything that we need to know about Gridania. So we have the main city, and we covered all of the surrounding parts of the Twelveswood, or the Shroud as it is known by the Gridanians. Otherwise, the next video we are going to be going over Mordona. So Mordona is going to be a little bit different than how I've done things so far, because it's kind of like a city, but not really a city. It's more like a giant settlement in a very dangerous area. So we're going to be covering Mordona in just one video. So it's going to be its history, all of its landmark, and basic information that we need to know about this particular area before we move on to Ishgard. So I do plan on getting Ishgard out as soon as possible. So we're going to be covering the main city as well as the history and major figures that we really need to know about for Ishgard. So I hope you're looking forward to that. Otherwise, in the meantime, this is going to be Fantasy Girl signing out, and I hope to see you around Eorzea sometime. Take care.